The late anthropologist Edward H. Spicer wrote that the initial Europeans who participated in colonization of the Americas were heirs to rich and ancient cultures, social relations, and customs in their lands of origin, whether Spain, France, Holland, or England. In the passage to the Americas and encountering the indigenous inhabitants, they largely abandoned the webs of European social relations. What each actually participated in was a culture of conquest, violence, expropriation, destruction, and dehumanization. Spicer's observation is true, but the culture of conquest didn't start with Europeans crossing the Atlantic. European institutions and the world view of conquest and colonialism had formed several centuries before that. From the 11th through the 13th centuries, Europeans conducted the Crusades to conquer North Africa and the Middle East, leading to unprecedented wealth in the hands of a few. This profit-based religion was the deadly element that European merchants and settlers brought to the Americas. In addition to seeking personal wealth, colonizers expressed a Christian zeal that justified colonialism. Along with that came the militaristic tradition that had also developed in Western Europe during the Crusades, literally carrying of the cross. Although the popes, beginning with Urban II, called for most of the ventures, the crusading armies were mercenary outfits that promised the soldiers the right to sack and loot Muslim towns and cities, feats that would gain them wealth and prestige back home. Toward the end of the 13th century, the papacy began directing such mercenaries to crush domestic enemies in their midst as well, pagans and commoners in general, especially women, as ostensible witches and heretics. In this way, knights and noblemen could seize land and force the commoners living on it into servitude. Historian Peter Linebaugh notes that whereas the anti-Muslim crusades were attempts to control the lucrative Muslim trade routes to the Far East, the domestic crusades against heretics and commoners were carried out to terrorize poor people and at the same time to enlist them in the lucrative and adventurous yet holy venture. Crusading was thus a murderous device to resolve a contradiction by bringing baron and commoner together in the cauldron of religious war. The first population forcibly organized under the profit motive, whose labor was exploited well before overseas exploitation was possible, was the European peasantry. Once forced off their land, they had nothing to eat and nothing to sell but their labor. In addition, entire nations, such as Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Bohemia, the Basque Country, and Catalonia, were colonized and forced under the rule of various monarchies. The Moorish nation and the Sephardic Jewish minority were conquered and physically deported by the Castilian Aragon monarchy from the Iberian Peninsula, a long-term project culminating in group expulsions beginning in 1492, the year Columbus sailed to America. The institutions of colonialism and methods for relocation, deportation, and expropriation of land had already been practiced, if not perfected, by the end of the 15th century. The rise of the modern state in Western Europe was based on the accumulation of wealth by means of exploiting human labor and displacing millions of subsistence producers from their lands. The armies that did this work benefited from technological innovations that allowed the development of more effective weapons of death and destruction. When these states expanded overseas to obtain even more resources, land, and labor, they were not starting anew. The peoples of the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and the Andes were the first overseas victims. West and South Africa, North America, and the rest of South America followed. Then came all of Africa, the Pacific, and Asia. The sea voyages of European explorers and merchants in the late 15th and early 16th centuries were not the first of their kind. These voyagers borrowed the techniques for long-distance sea travel from the Arab world. Before the Arabs